Now we can join the Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab to get the UK government's reaction to that election result in the United States. So we know that Joe Biden is going to be the next president. Is that going to be good news for the United Kingdom?
Well, look, I first of all congratulate President-elect Joe Biden. He's won with more votes in history in any election. We congratulate Vice President-elect Kamala Harris. She will be the first black woman to hold that office, a landmark achievement. And we're excited by the opportunities for working with the new administration. The contours adjust, the opportunities, some of the risks adjust when there's changes in the White House. But I'm very confident from climate change to cooperation on coronavirus to counter-terrorism, there's a huge bedrock of underlying interests and values that bind us very closely together. And when we look at what Joe Biden has talked about doing in foreign policy, he will have no greater ally and no more dependable friend in the United Kingdom.
I wonder if he would see it that way, though, because, of course, Boris Johnson has previously written in the past about Barack Obama's Park Kenyan ancestry. And just yesterday, a former spokesperson for President Obama reacted to the Prime Minister's congratulations with this shape-shifting creep weighs in. We will never forget your racist comments about Obama and slavish devotion to Trump. I mean, it doesn't sound like that relationship is going to be very special, does it?
Well, look, you can always pick political campaigners and activists and even advisors. I know from the work I've done with our embassy in Washington, talking to congressional leaders across the House, but including Senator Chris Coons, very close to President-elect Biden. I've talked to Nancy Pelosi. I've talked to the Irish caucus led by Richie Neal. I know that, of course, there'll always be points of tension in any relationship, particularly the deepest and the most profound ones.
So you admit that might be a point of tension then?
No, what I'm saying is the bedrock, the depth, the range of things that we do together, and the things that President-elect Biden wants to achieve internationally, the things he's been talking about in this campaign, not just security, counterterrorism in the Middle East, but coronavirus and returning to the Paris Climate Agreement. These are all things which, particularly with our G7 presidency next year and our hosting of COP26, I think that we'll have a huge amount to cooperate on, and I'm excited about working with the new administration.
It's interesting, isn't it? A Biden campaign insider is quoted in the Sunday Times today as well, saying that Joe Biden was shocked at the dismissiveness of black rights after you called the Black Lives Matter protesters taking the knee a symbol of subjugation and subordination, and said you would only kneel before the Queen or when proposing to your wife. It sounds like you might have a bit of making up to do too.
Well, it's not my impression from talking, as I say, to congressional leaders across the House, including Democrats. But look, we're absolutely committed to ending racism, zero tolerance for racism. I think in a tolerant debate, people should be able to express that solidarity with that incredibly important principle in their own way. But look, as I said, you can always pick a snippet from the newspapers or from activists around the campaign. What I know from talking to the leaders that I've spoken to, that we're going to have a very strong relationship. And there's just so much that we can cooperate on, and so much of what President-elect Biden has been talking about, more international collaboration on coronavirus. Look at what the Prime Minister did in hosting the Gavi Summit, which allows us to increase the funding for equitable access to a vaccine. Look at what Joe Biden has said around climate change. We're hosting COP26 next year. I think very much the pioneers in that space. So I'm sure you'll be able to find snippets of discord amongst in the aftermath of a campaign. What I'm saying is I'm absolutely confident in the bedrock of values and interests that we share. And of course, when America wants to act in the world, they've got, as I said, no more reliable, no more dependable friend than the United Kingdom.
I absolutely accept that when it comes to coronavirus and climate change, as you've mentioned, we've got more in common with Joe Biden than Donald Trump. Are you concerned, though, that it might be a bit more tricky to do a trade deal with Joe Biden than it would have been with Donald Trump? Donald Trump, of course, has said that we would be front of the queue because of the special relationship. He believes in Brexit. Joe Biden said that he would have voted Remain. And Joe Biden's also said that any trade deal between the US and UK must be contingent upon respect for the agreement, withdrawal agreement, and preventing the return of a hard border. It's going to be harder to do a trade deal with Joe Biden, isn't it?
I think we'll have to see, but look, let me tell you what I know from having been out to Washington and talked right through the Brexit process to people like Richie Neal and the Irish caucus, including many Democrats. we were able to give them positive reassurance when we signed the withdrawal agreement. I've been able to explain the UK position. We're the ones that have been unconditional in saying we'll never see any infrastructure put up at the border between the north and the south in Ireland. And we've, of course, listened to the concerns of our American friends. The Democrats feel very vested in the Good Friday Agreement. We understand that. We look back at the work of George Mitchell, Bill Clinton. But I think it's also fair to point out, as I've used those opportunities in Washington to do, that the EU is itself putting pressure on the Good Friday Agreement with the approach it's taken. So I'm sure we'll have a sensible, common sense approach. And actually, when I look across the piece at the issues, I'm looking forward to the opportunities that we'll have. And I'm confident that the relationship between the UK and the US will thrive in the weeks and months ahead.
Now, last night you tweeted out congratulations to Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, but you also said that some of the processes are still playing out. What did you mean by that?
Well, it's a statement of fact that we haven't had the formal statement by the Electoral College, and of course there are the appeals going on. And we've, I make no apology as Foreign Secretary for treading very sensitively and carefully whilst we waited for the clarity in the result. We got that clarity, and we offer the new administration, President-elect Biden, Vice President-elect Harris, our full support, and look forward to working with them in the future. But I think it's right that we're careful to respect the sensitivities and indeed the integrity of the US process. That's incumbent on me as Foreign Secretary.
You say you have to be careful and respect the sensitivities, but some would argue that's exactly what the tweet doesn't do, because, we've all heard Donald Trump allege that fraud has taken place, that the election's been stolen from him without evidence. Do you not accept that some might see that tweet as playing into those conspiracists?
No, I think that's a very partisan skew on it. The reality is we want to respect the integrity and the processes in place. It's not for us to start adjudicating on the appeals, the legal claims and the counterclaims. But what we have said, the result is now very clear. I think it's beyond reasonable doubt, in my view. And we welcome the new administration. We congratulate President-elect Biden, Vice President-elect Harris. And frankly, there are those that want to criticise the UK at this point in time, come what may, and whatever we say, whatever this government says. I'm going to focus on the substance. But I do think people complain about interference in our politics here. I think it's right to tread carefully and sensitively in relation to, particularly after what was clearly a very close election, far closer than the media or the pundits expected, and has been contentious in all sorts of ways. So we proceeded sensitively and carefully. We wanted to respect the process, but we look forward to working with the new administration.
Do you think that all votes should be counted in a democratic election?
Look, I'm not going to get drawn into opining on what is a different system in the US. What I can say, and I said from the outset...
Hang on, sorry. The question is, do you think all votes should be counted in a democratic election? I find it astonishing there's not an answer to that.
Well, because what you're going to... If I say yes and there's an appeal that goes one way, I mean, we know, for example, there's going to be recounts. Okay, we know that in relation to some of the state seats, we know in relation to some of the Senate seats, but we can also say that the result is clear now, and I don't think that's preempting those other processes, which is exactly why I said we should tread sensitively to respect the integrity of the process. And we've always said, and I've been very clear all week, we're very confident the checks and balances in the US system that will produce a definitive result, and I think we've got one now.
But I'm not asking about appeals, I'm not asking about checks and balances. I'm literally just saying, should all votes be counted in a democratic election?
Look, in principle, yes, of course. But what I'm not going to get drawn in...
So why didn't you just say that then?
Because what you're really trying to do, Sophie, is drag me in to the legal claims about whether or not all the votes have properly been counted when you look at the mail votes, the votes in person, and the claims that have been made, for example, about the posted military ballots. So I just don't want to get sucked into that. We've got to clear it.
I'm not trying to suck you into anything with respect, Mr. Raab. I'm just trying to ask. The reason I'm asking the question is because the Prime Minister's spokesperson wouldn't say that all votes should be counted in a democratic election early this week, which, frankly, I find quite astonishing. And I was just wondering if you would say the same thing. It's obviously you're reluctant to as well.
No, your next question will be, well, if all votes should be counted, and we haven't had all votes counted, why are you welcoming the new administration? And the reality is the result now is clear. None of the other processes which I've referred to, which are ongoing, will affect, I think, the outcome of this race. And I think that's the approach that people have taken in the United States, and that's the approach the UK has taken, along with other international leaders.
Genuinely, that wasn't going to be my next question. I was assuming that you would say yes to that question.
Well, look, then someone else will say, well, why aren't we waiting for all the votes to be counted, including all the reruns and the recounts, before we step in and say we welcome the result? I think what we do is wait until the result is clear, beyond doubt it is now. We welcome President-elect Biden and Vice President-elect Harris. We're looking forward to working with them. We really don't want to, Sophie, get drawn into the cut and thrust of the controversies, the claims and counterclaims, either in the election or in the immediate aftermath. And that's because we respect Americans' right to choose for themselves, and we respect the checks and balances in the American system, which will produce, as they have, a clear result.
OK, now I'm keen, of course, to talk as well about the COVID-19 lockdown that we're having in England now. Now, when the Prime Minister announced it last weekend, he said, in this country, the virus is spreading even faster than the reasonable worst-case scenario of our scientific advisors. What was that worst-case scenario?
What we've been concerned about all along is that even as we make progress in some areas, and there have been illustrations of that the exponential rise, and the combination with the R rate moving well beyond 1, but also prevalence increasing in certain areas, means that the NHS leading into Christmas will be overwhelmed, that we'd be hit with a higher fatality rate. And if you look at the 2 weeks data leading up to the Saturday that you referred to when the Prime Minister made his decision, we saw a 90% increase in hospital admissions, a 65% increase in ventilator bed usage, and that is often the precursor to more fatalities. So I think we did see a very rapid and fluid change in the behaviour of the virus and uptick in it, and we wanted to crack down on that and come down on that as swiftly and decisively as we could.
Now, we were shown a series of slides last Saturday to justify the lockdown. We were told that daily deaths would reach 1,500, with one scenario saying it could be as high as 4,000. Now, those figures have since been revised down. Is the government just showing us the scariest data on this?
No, look, we show models which show what could happen if certain scenarios play out. We've corrected the slide you referred to, and it was the wealth of scientific information that comes forward. We're trying to be as transparent as possible. Of course, it's constantly an iterative process, and if mistakes are made or facts have to be changed, then that's the point of transparency. But I think the case for the measures we've taken is very clear. We want to get through to the 2nd of December. At that point, we will transition to back to a localised approach. It's always been our preference, but we need to get the R rate and the prevalence of the virus down, and use the next few weeks to do that.
Of course, no one is trying to underplay the seriousness of the situation, and in no way am I trying to say that the decision to lock down was right or wrong. There are others far more qualified than me to make those calls. But, you know, the policy was justified by some scary data that's now been revised down, as you say. Theresa May said this week that for many people, it looks as if the figures are chosen to support the policy rather than the policy being based on the figures. Does the public deserve some more transparency here?
Well, the transparency is we're putting a lot of data out there, and when there's a mistake with it, we change it, and so we respond to this very scrutiny that transparency brings. I think that's the right thing. We're trying to be as transparent as possible. I think the scientists, particularly Chris Whitty and Patrick Vallance, have done a sterling job. It's very difficult. The science is never entirely clear. It's constantly contested, and with a new pandemic and a virus that behaves in unprecedented ways that we're learning about every day, it's right that the science is constantly evolving in terms of what we know. But as I said, the 2 weeks leading up to the Saturday in which the PM announced the latest set of national restrictions has shown very clearly a big rise in hospital admissions and a big rise in ventilator bed usage. And that's the point at which we know not only is there a clear threat to people's health, and particularly we're worried about people losing their lives, but also the threat to the NHS becoming overwhelmed. And I think that case was very clear. But of course, we put the data out there. If it's incorrect, then the very point of the transparency is to allow it to be challenged, and we make the best judgments that we can made on the basis of the best data and science that's made available to us. OK, now you banned travel from Denmark to the United Kingdom without exemptions because of a coronavirus mutation there that has been linked to mink. And there is a suggestion that this new mutation may prove more resistant to a vaccine. How worried should we be about this? Well, we've taken a precautionary measure. I spoke to my Danish opposite number on Friday. We need to look very carefully at the science. I think the Danish government are being very forward-leaning and transparent and cooperative about this. But what the concern is that you see a mutated version of coronavirus, and that if it spread, it would undermine our ability to make an effective vaccine in the future, because it would allow the virus a route round. So although it's a precautionary step, I think it is the right step whilst we engage with all of the health experts around the world, with the Danish authorities, and be clear about what's happened in Denmark, in particular in relation to the minks.
Thank you very much for being on the programme, Dominic Raab. I know you're isolating at the minute as well, so I hope you're feeling well.
I don't have coronavirus, but I was in contact with someone who tested positive, and it's frustrating, it's inconvenient, but we've all got to follow the rules. That's the way we get through this.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for being on. Dominic Raab there.
My pleasure.